Welcome back. So for this next session slot, there are 3 concurrent sessions happening. In the novella room, which is the room on the second floor here, there's a workshop focused on exploring micro-credential enrollment with strategic foresight, featuring Laura Viselli, Elisa Arnold, Graham Cannon, and Iris Elliott. In Beaton Hall, down on the ground floor, is a workshop focused on building the future of e-learning, collaborative course design for rapid, agile training programs, featuring Amanda Douglas-Young, Mark Bowden, and Deanna DeVito. Here in this room, for the people who are physically here and the people online, we're going to be focused on new solutions to old problems. How micro-credentials help solve Canada's productivity challenge. I've had some conversation about that today. And I'm so grateful to the panelists who are going to be talking about this topic. That's Val Walker, the Chief Executive Officer of the Business Higher Education Roundtable, Matt McKean, Chief Research and Development Officer of the Business Higher Education Roundtable, and the conversation will be moderated by Robert Luke, CEO of eCampusOntario. Please.
Thank you very much, Amrit. Appreciate it. Thank you. You take a good selfie.
Thank you.
I'm really pleased to be here to talk about productivity. It's been an ongoing topic of the day. I think it's actually a pretty important thing for us all to understand about why we do this. And interestingly enough, I was just in this breakout session that Mike Leon and his partner was talking about marketing, and they were talking about a marketing boot camp, and it was really cool. And he talked about they put these marketers through a boot camp where they all have to like market the same lemonade. And he said it's very difficult because to do that because it's the same product and it's highly regulated, and it reminded me of education, that we're all marketing the same product, we're highly regulated, over-regulated, some might say, and how are we going to do that? And his catchphrase on that was, we need to tell stories about how it is we are marketing, well, in his case, lemonade, but I guess for us, well, lemonade, making some lemonade from the lemons that we have. I'm really pleased to be here with Val and Matt, great friends of eCampusOntario. The Business Higher Education Roundtable, as you should know, is the convener of record for conversations on between businesses and the academic environment. So I'm really super happy to be here to moderate a conversation. Val and Matt are going to be chatting in a brief moment about soon-to-be-released Be Her RBC Thought Leadership Report on higher education's role in driving Canada's productivity. And we're going to hear a little bit today about the findings of the report with a special emphasis on micro-credentials, because this is, of course, the micro-credential forum.
Like the time and the place.
It seems like it is the time and the place. If you wanted macro-credentials, I apologize. That's in the... It's one room over, yeah. This is about micro-credentials. In order to help alleviate skills shortages and be a lever to strengthen key sectors of the economy. So thanks a lot for being here. Why don't we just start with the report and its relevance. Tell us about it. Why is it important? Why now? And what does post-secondary education have to do with solving Canadian productivity problems?
We might start by talking a little bit about Be Her.
How about we start with you telling us a little bit about Be Her?
I don't mind if I do, Robert. I hope folks know about us already. I've been told to say I'm sure you already know about us. We are a member-based organization created as an initial project initiative out of the Business Council of Canada, so a big industry association who doesn't normally do stuff like this, but they put out a skills survey every couple of years, and the question they asked the CEOs and the chief human resource officers was like, were a lot of questions about talent. Where do you find it? Who do you partner with to create the talent pipelines that you need? Do you partner with folks on research? How's that going? And one of the key takeaways from that original report when it came out was from the industry sector, and we just heard about this on the last panel, we would love to partner more closely with post-secondaries, and we're just not really sure how to do that. And so in the absence of that, often we'll go and create our own internal professional development, what have you, when there's opportunities to partner. And so we were initially created as a pilot to see whether we could create some momentum and gravitas to bring leaders from across the country, from across industry sectors, from across colleges, polytechnics, and universities, together with some of the biggest companies in the country to solve some of these big challenges that really sit at that nexus between industry and higher education. And so we're really proud of the work we've done. One of the biggest questions that was put to us in the first early days was, how can we better prepare entry-level talent to hit the ground running? And of course, part of the answer has been, and has been for decades, more work-integrated learning. We really took that on and tried to work and continue to work to get every student some kind of work experience before they graduate. The federal government took on that mandate in 2019 and has funded a ton of work-integrated learning opportunities since then. We continue to do that work. Proud to say that since 2019, we have provided over 70,000 work opportunities for students in all different industry sectors all across the country. Our director of WIL is here, right here. Andrew Beeler is awesome. You should talk to him if you are interested to know more about that. But first and foremost, what we do is convene with purpose. And the with purpose part is really important to us. A lot of people have meetings, not unlike this one today. I know Robert thinks about convening with purpose too. You come and you talk to folks for a bit, and then you go back to your desk and it's full of papers and your inboxes, and that's it. And our goal with our members, and increasingly with the public, is to bring people together around a certain topic, and then we go away, and as our takeaway is to actually do something coming out of the conversations, whether it's create a new program or launch a new research project or do something to advance and make progress on the conversations that were had during that convening. And I think we're getting kind of good at it. We had our first public event last week. I know some of you folks were here. And really, that's my next picture, is just us to prove it, that we really do convene. But one of the things that was discussed at this summit, and we are keen to get your input on and talk about today, is, like Robert said off the top, thought leadership paper that we are doing in collaboration with John Stackhouse and his team at RBC's Office of Thought Leadership on productivity, of course, because everyone's talking about productivity these days, but specifically the role post-secondary can and should be playing in productivity in this country, and going beyond the headline and 30,000-foot level to say, like, what are some of the challenges facing post-secondaries right now that are making it hard for them to be as awesome as they can be, and how can we then start to break some of those challenges down to really engage and empower post-secondary leaders and throughout to contribute in a bigger way and have a bigger impact on our overall productivity in the country. How's that for a setup?
That's a good setup. We are still researchers by training, as so many people are in this room, and so we view our convening, not unlike events like this, as really big, fancy focus groups, and where we try to surface some of the early signals, the best thinking solutions to actual problems, as opposed to, as Val said, talking at that 30,000 level, although you need to do that sometimes. And so we also surface what we convene about and what we then develop programs about from our members, and we think that's pretty critical. And so the productivity conversation, none of us invented it, but this was something that the CEOs in particular around our roundtable have been talking a lot about. And BHER's wheelhouse is the skills and talent piece, and if we're going to try to intervene and solve a problem, it will be through the skills and talent lens. And so that was the impetus for a couple of meetings that we've done more recently around productivity, trying to figure out what's the role of higher education in solving or helping fix the productivity challenge in Canada. And we think there is one, not unlike the work-integrated learning conversation. Post-secondary was a little resistant maybe at first, and I think they're still a little resistant, and that's part of the conceit of BHER, the Business Plus Higher Education Roundtable, is to bring both sides together, help them understand that they're talking about the same thing, and how can then we leverage both sides to work together to solve it. And so that's the idea. That's what we did and continue to do. And we came up with this idea of putting together this a research report. Again, one of our members is the Royal Bank of Canada. Their CEO is the chair of our board. he has some sway over our organization. The RBC has a thought leadership team, and so we started working on a report to try to look at the issue of higher education's role in tackling the productivity crisis. As we got sort of deeper into it, because we, as I said, started off by saying, come from the research side and have lived and breathed this stuff like all of you do in your own way, we needed to not just put out a report that said there's barriers and we need to fix them, but to try to actually figure out what are the problems that need fixing. Because it's really easy, I find, in the higher ed space to say, you guys need to do this. Just start doing this. This is the labor market need. Go and realign with it. So, but there's probably like 5 steps or 12 or 37 before that we need to think about before we can get deeper into that. So that's part of the idea. So maybe we move to our...
I'll just interject because I'm reminded of something you said today. Everybody says we should be coordinated, but nobody likes to be coordinated, right? That's part of the problem.
This is a big part of the problem. So, yeah.
So helpful that we've already touched on productivity. I heard Amrit, when I was arriving, quizzing you on the definition of labor productivity, so I will not do that part. But in essence, the goal of the paper is to look at, you know, the fact that we have an incredible higher education system in this country. We have a very educated workforce. We also have really kick-ass research. So what are we missing, or what is not quite working? Why are we not then as high in all of these rankings on our GDP per worker output? What's going on? And so this is how we've stated the question. We were very happy to have the economists at RBC to help with some of the economics data. And then we've done a bunch of consultations throughout the last 6 months to really try to get below the surface. The paper is coming out soon. I'm hesitant to give you an exact date because, you know, with papers, but the second week in March is where we're targeting. And the point of me saying that is that we have identified some of the things that are in there, but this is kind of part of the test run. So when we come out later and say, do you guys have any questions? Like, if you think what we're saying is great, cool, that would be nice to know. If you think it's complete, I was going to say a swear word. If it's not great, also let us know, because it's not too late for us to have this as an extension of those consultations. Just really briefly, I know you guys have already seen this, but this is in graphical form, what the word said on the previous page. For those of you like myself who are visual people, the yellow line there, so x-axis time, yellow line is GDP growth. Yellow line is GDP. Those both look blue to me. Those are different colors of blue. One is productivity. The one that after the blip in 2020 starts to go down, that's productivity. So to state this in words, there's a strong positive correlation between GDP, productivity, and higher education attainment until 2020. And then as you continue to see higher education level attainment and GDP go up, we see the fall in productivity. This is stating the challenge. Not to put too fine a point on it, this is my last graph to show you. Red is Canada. This is that OECD peer countries we like to compare ourselves to. I have to say editorially, I'm not sure why Colombia and Costa Rica are our primary comparators.
Because we like to go there in the winter?
Okay. But the problem is, and Arvind said it, like, we're not really even in the middle. Like, this is another way to properly articulate the challenge that we're looking to understand better. So how's that for a setup? Do you wanna?
Yeah, Robert.
I think it's a great setup. I mean, I'm actually really curious about Costa Rica and Colombia.
I was hoping you would go there, yeah.
No, yeah. I'm not surprised about Korea at all, given that they have also a high level of educational attainment, but it strikes me that we've been confusing causation with correlation among educational attainment. And so can you talk to us a little bit about what's holding us back then? So what are the challenges that you've identified?
Some of them are new challenges. Some of them, I think, are the age-old challenges that we haven't solved for over a long period of time, and in part because I think we continue to just identify them. We're really good in Canada at diagnosing problems in higher education, not so good at solving them. BHER tries to solve problems, as we said. We've been trying to solve a will problem, or entry-level work experience problem. I think there's problems here that need solving. And so this is why we really do present these challenges for feedback, for your engagement, to figure out, we need to build work plans under these and figure out who are the people we need to work together to solve them. So there's a long-standing disconnect between the knowledge and skills outcomes in Canadian higher education systems and labor market needs. It connects with the labor market alignment narrative that we've heard. It's really easy to say that. We have not been able to solve it, in part because we don't have particularly great labor market information. But even if we did, I don't know that we'd necessarily be able to solve it, because there are also some structural problems in higher education. The funding models, the models of hiring and job permanency, there are structural barriers to actually changing post-secondary, which is why I say it's really easy for people to sit here and say you should just be doing this now. And we have the great good fortune to convene presidents of institutions, and we understand through their lens the barriers they face. And a CEO of a company has a lot more power in Canada than a president of a post-secondary institution when you think about the power they have in decision making and over the budgets they have and hiring and firing decisions. And so this is a structural barrier to doing more of a thing we want them to do. And so we need to find new and creative ways to solve for that. That might mean empowering our post-secondary presidents in new and different ways. So anyway, improving our labor market information is an age-old one. We have created councils for that. We have sector councils that collect their own labor market information and keep it to themselves and do very unique things. Our general conceit here is that probably 75 or 80% of what a particular sector needs is pretty similar to what another sector needs, and maybe it's that last 20 that needs some kind of tailoring, but man, we all think we've started from scratch and our information is unique, and what's happening in biotalent is unlike anything that's happening in manufacturing, and I doubt that's the case. But that's just me trying to be annoying here.
Well, I don't think so. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, because I heard Vincent this morning talk about the micro-credential wish list, and top of his wish list was basic human skills that everybody needs. So yeah. I think you're probably right.
I think so. I mean, that's part of the origin story of some of the surveying we did when BHER was still close, doing a skills survey with the Business Council of Canada, which was that the top skills that employers are looking for are the human skills. Again, easier said than done, and we've all said it. We need communication resilience, but we've not figured out very well how to train for those. You do implicitly through experience, let alone accredit it. And so I think we're making some progress more recently to try to do that. But that's part of the problem. So really easy to say human skills, really hard to actually train or assess for it. Let alone, and to assess in the hiring process, which is where it gets more relevant to employers.
Especially for small to medium-sized employers, I would think.
Especially.
Because they don't have an HR department.
That's it. It's similarly, it's very easy to say, oh man, Canada doesn't produce enough people with advanced degrees relative to other countries, and even if we did, the uptake in our private sector or the recognition of the value of these people is lower than certainly in the US, and that's why our productivity, it's very easy to say that. It's very hard in reality to, well, there's a skills articulation issue that, Robert, we've talked a lot about that goes for anybody. No matter how many letters they have after their name, if they cannot clearly articulate and transfer what that experience means to the person sitting across the table from them, whether that's their grandmother or a potential employer, then the number of degrees or diplomas themselves, I would argue, don't matter so much. And so this is, again, it's an easy thing to say, and it's a really hard thing to think about how to move the needle on. I'm going to move us to our other.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an inverse correlation between the amount of initials after your name and your ability to articulate your skills?
In general, yes. I hope maybe there are a few exceptions kicking around, maybe even in this room, but yeah, yes, and then you can ask the follow-on question, which is like, well, whose fault is that? When you've been trained academically for your entire career and your value and your chance of promotion are all based on how smart you sound and how many papers you've had published and how clearly you can communicate why you're smarter than everyone else. how is it for that person to then have to, know how work works and communicate about those broader, higher level, whatever you want to call them, human skills, foundational skills, transferable skills, that actually, as we keep trying to pound into everyone's heads, really are the ones that matter the most to employers.
And those skills are evident in this room, particularly the room over there, because everybody's talking to each other. That's a human skill, being able to talk to somebody about what you're doing.
All I was going to say is, but those of us who did maybe one too many degrees, because we didn't know what to do with our lives and just stayed in school and thought it made sense that people would care about that you know so much about a war or something like that, like I might. Could you imagine asking your supervisor to help you understand the skills that you have? That's probably asking too much. And this is also to me why the mismatch between graduates with advanced degrees narrative also requires the kind of coordination and collaboration that I don't think we see, because we ask our post-secondaries to be everything to everybody, and that's a topic that I think we need to talk a little bit more about. But within them, then we ask you, in your role, need to be everything to everybody, to ask your PhD supervisor to also train you, to help you articulate your skills. That's asking too much, because nobody trained them to do it.
What are the other challenges?
Yeah, see, thank you, Robert, moving us along here. We have, I'm sorry, I don't know why that one photo isn't there. Again, please know, and I would just, as an aside, these are the high-level challenges. We're going to talk about them in more detail. We do talk about them in more detail in the paper. When I said earlier today that everyone likes to, the coordination piece, no one likes to be coordinated, we have lived, I'm going to tell you guys, some of that through working on this paper with folks in, let's say, the private sector, to work collaboratively on a thing and gain perspectives and opinions from all across the country is very hard. So if you're looking at these right now, as I know some of you are thinking, well, yeah, obviously STEAM, not STEM, I hear you. But then let's talk about what that means, like the A, and I know there's all these other acronyms, but what does that actually mean for multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary coordination? We heard someone up here talking about, it was Jen saying, we wanted a case competition where folks from the business department talk to folks from the agriculture department, and even within a single institution, they're like, we don't really do that, right? So this is the high-level message that you might be nodding at, thinking, well, yes, obviously, but then let's talk about how you actually break those silos and barriers down within institutions, within jurisdictions, across jurisdictions, for the sake of that productivity narrative. So STEAM, we're thinking especially, and Matt, as he often says, is our social sciences and humanities.
Bleeding heart.
Yeah.
Well, we heard about design earlier.
Yep.
Pro tip, up until 2017, the Canadian research classification system did not include any of the disciplines of design. Does now. That's a good thing.
We could have a separate conversation about the utility of that classification system, but that's okay. These are the other challenges, right? Something around looking at how to properly and comprehensively integrate humanities into all of the training. STEM gets a lot of play these days. STEM is awesome, but that is not at the expense of all those human skills that people say they need, right? We obviously have some work to do with integrating our international students and figuring out how they continue to play a really important role in our economy. We did some cool analysis, and this, I don't have all the graphs to show you yet, but this last one, we looked at a breakdown of people by graduations based on discipline and level of study, and mapped them into which industry sectors they went into, and then looked at those individual industry sectors and the level of productivity within, say, professional services and financial services versus construction or manufacturing. And there is a high percentage of our graduates with advanced degrees going into demonstrably low productivity sectors. It's pretty interesting. I'm not suggesting that we force people into certain industry sectors so that we can reap productivity gains, but there's some interesting data there looking at where people actually choose to go, and if you have those areas that are high productivity or have the potential to have productivity growth, what can we do to market? And those, guess what, guys, are the ones where there's a lot of job openings. So what can we do to at least better inform and raise awareness about the breadth of opportunities for someone with 3 history degrees to go into construction or advanced manufacturing, which is not necessarily the obvious fit. So,
thank you for the shout out. Humanities students can sometimes be considered an equity-deserving group when it comes to labor market outcomes. So the other big categories here are the piece about Canada. Canada has been in a growth model, right, since the Second World War. I've been a researcher in this space for 15 years or so and written more reports than I care to count about skills in post-secondary education and the growth and how we need to have a post-secondary within walking distance of every human in Canada or something like that. But we have a model now where we have every institution, it seems, trying to be everything to everyone, as I said before, and I do think it's important now to start revisiting the differentiation conversation, because it's really hard to be good at anything if you are trying to be everything to everybody. I think that is one of the things that must be holding us back. And it's okay as an institution. I hope if we can move in this direction and we can, again, we got to make that work plan under it, figure out what that means to say, you do the research, we'll do the skills training, we'll do the vocational training. It's to that point, like you're the person who's working to cure cancer or develop the electric vehicle, the research side maybe shouldn't care about micro-credentials. Maybe that institution isn't the one to do it. So I'm being provocative, but I'm very keen to
Questions will be in 5 minutes. Matt's right here, not going anywhere.
But not everyone should. But so we're very keen to crowdsource and talk a bit more about the differentiation, because everybody again points to our OECD peers, and particularly the Northern European countries, and that is something they have solved for and sorted out and have come at peace with. And when it comes to that challenge we often hear about as industry doesn't know who to talk to or who to collaborate with, or they've gone through the wrong door, that's got to be one of the barriers, because they don't know which even institution to talk to, let alone department within an institution. So that's one of the big ones, and I think it connects to the second challenge that's on that slide around why we don't have the kind of adoption of post-secondary research.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because when we had a discussion today with the panel that you moderated about the role of design, and Arvind gave a very illustrative example of the iPhone and the components of it, the builders of it, and the designers of it. And in many respects, we're not making use of research because we just see ideas as another raw resource to ship off the land for somebody to apply value to and sell back at us. Like we're mining raw ideas like the lithium. Do we mine lithium? I don't actually know. Whatever we mine. Cobalt. I know we mine cobalt.
Feels right.
Yeah.
Are there challenges though that we've missed on this as we continue to sort of crowdsource and think about? I'm asking the crowd or Robert or others.
Well, we have about 5 or 10 minutes left, so let's run into a few things about how we can do better, and we'll open it up. So we'll give everybody a 3 or 4 minute warning to answer the provocateur's questions. So how can we do better?
So we have identified 6 key things here. And again, the paper itself talks a lot about some of the early thinking on how we can do these things. So this is, again, the high level how. We know there are barriers internally and at the legislative level that restrict how quickly new programs can come to be or changes with existing programming. So looking to actually eliminate some of those barriers to program innovation is the first thing. For sure, measurement and reporting. I know this is a long-standing issue. I think it's time we really look at, especially with the help of AI potentially, how to get closer to real-time reporting. And happy to say we have a project ongoing right now with eCampus to look at I'll just give you a very specific example, to look at some of the specific labor market impacts of the changes to the eligibility list to IRCC's postgraduate work permits. I'm sure folks out here know a bunch of programs that did not make it on those eligibility lists, and therefore the students, international students from those programs are no longer eligible to stay in the country when they're done. Well, that was informed, we are told, by StatsCan and other, I'm sure, very smart economists telling us where the biggest needs are and aligning needs with graduation. We're looking at a regional level. It comes back to place from earlier. What are the regional impacts of this school who 60% of the graduates in this program are no longer going to be there to be taken up by the local economy. And in particular, what impact does that have on the industries who are used to getting 50 new students every year to come in and work for them, when now that is going to be 15 because the rest of the students can't stay because they're looking at it at a very granular level might be one way before we try to just refine our economic models to be better at predicting the future based on the past. Not surprising, will is a big thing, of course, and we've heard a lot about it already, upskilling and reskill opportunities. Very curious to know what you guys think about this idea around differentiation and specialization when it comes to institutions. It's one of the crunchier ones. We're not sure how people will think about that. And then again, the long-standing one, but what can we actually do to make it easier to reduce that friction in getting companies to partner and work more closely with institutions when it comes to research and commercialization and innovation?
So on the face of it, those are fairly straightforward, and they sound easy, but I mean, they're probably pretty hard to do. Like institutional differentiation, we don't have a model here in this country for how an educational institution would say, well, I'm just going to do this in this lane. The LMI side, the labor market information, I'm reminded of Beverly's point this morning that she made in her presentation, that labor market information is necessary but not sufficient to support Indigenous communities. I think that strikes me as a real gap, and glad to see work-integrated learning in there. Be here, of course, if you did not invent the term work-integrated learning, you have certainly perfected it. When I think about will, there's a word for that. It's not going to come to me. It's like Google. If you Google something for search, when the word means the same thing, be here means the same as well. That's what I'm trying to say. I'll think of it later. Esprit d'escalier. When I leave, I'll think of the word. And earlier in an earlier slide, you mentioned that you've done 65,000 wills. Like, that's incredible. Like that's a massive impact. So given that, like, what's next? What should we be thinking of as we sit here, go back to our institutions? What's our call to action? And while you answer that, I don't know who's got the microphone, but I'm going to ask if, Dejoho has the microphone. So put up your hand if you have a question. Do you want to answer that? Or do you want to? No.
Oh, what's our call to action?
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought we were asking that. Yes, fair. To be honest, our call to action is we're inventing this on the spot because we didn't talk about this. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have to think about each one of these things that require change, like changing our post-secondary system or systems across Canada. So it's where I think we stop short or we have false starts in Canada is because we stay at the hyperbolic level. And we just say what we need to do, and we diagnose the problem, but there isn't that work plan under it. So if we think about any one of these things, what's that incremental piece that we need to do next? And this is part of what we did with work-integrated learning. So the federal government in 2019 committed to 100% of post-secondary students should have a work experience before they graduate from their first diploma or degree. Now, it's not realistic in that environment when you're going from nothing to something to get every student in Canada 4-month or 8-month co-op experience. It's not reasonable. In the spirit of trying to get some kind of work experience for a young person, especially in disciplines where they didn't exist whatsoever, in regions where they weren't there, to have companies to the table that were never a part of it, we needed to start somewhere. And that meant creating new and innovative will types that served unique needs. And that's what we've leaned into. That's not a critique or criticism of structured will types, but it's recognizing that to get there, to make that incremental change, to get you that experience when you didn't have it and wouldn't have it otherwise, that's part of it. And so I think we need that kind of, ideally then every student would get some kind of structured work experience before they graduate, and the other countries have figured that out. But that's to me the call to action under each one of these, not the hyperbolic end result, but what's that next step on any one of these things to that we can then convene the right leaders to actually start making it happen.
Well said. Speaking of work-integrated learning, Sajeev is here from University of Waterloo, who, if you didn't invent the term co-op, certainly perfected that.
Thank you for that call out, because I was going to say we do 24,000 placements a year for co-ops around the globe. So, and I mention that because our co-op group actually wants to support a broader scale out. Waterloo can only do so much, but what can we do to enable other organizations to do the same? So that's more of a comment than anything. So, Sanjeev Gill, AVP Innovation, University of Waterloo, and I run this little organization called WatSpeed, which is our professional, corporate, and executive education arm for Waterloo. I guess I've got a bit of a unique perspective because I straddled corporate world and now academia. So in industry for over 25 years, 20 of those at IBM, and then onto the University of Waterloo for the last 6 years. So Be Her is obviously hugely interesting to me insofar as the mission and work that you have and the representation between the corporate world and the academic community. I would say that there's a couple things, and sorry, I've got like maybe 2 comments and questions kind of wrapped up together. We've got a really big issue, and it all trickles back to GDP and the impact of higher education on things like economic output for a country. There's empirical evidence that this is real. There's so much data that supports the relative importance of higher education and its impact on societies. It's irrefutable data. So why do we have this issue of disinterest from the public in higher education? That ultimately, when I say the public, those are voters, and those are the ones who ultimately make governments make decisions every 4 years. Hence, governments aren't really that interested in funding universities. And this is not a Canadian phenomenon. This is a global issue that's happening right now. What's going on is the question that's causing that disparity or dichotomy, I guess, when we know that higher education, and now what we're doing, a lot of us, and that, you know, on the side of higher education with I'm from the chip industry originally, in micro-credentials, where most of the organizations that support micro-credentials out of universities are sidebar, right? They're self-funded organizations. We're not, fortunately, we're kind of in between somewheres, but most are self-funded. But there will be a trickle-down effect to those organizations as universities and colleges begin to feel the pain, which they all are, in deficit positions. They're making tough decisions. I'm also leading a lot of that for the University of Waterloo right now, making really tough decisions on what we're going to do moving forward. Those organizations, and we've already seen a couple of them now in the country, really get extinguished. And those are the ones driving upskilling and reskilling. So there's a huge issue here that's going on. And I think that industry plays a massive, massive role in having a bigger voice at the table, especially with government. Because if you don't have the talent that you need, if you don't have the right skills that you're looking for, then I'm talking about industry right now, why isn't industry in Canada screaming bloody murder that what's going on with universities and colleges?
So there's a bunch of good questions in there. So Val, do you want to take a crack?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sanjay.
And I know this is a great question. I think there's a few things, and like Waterloo's a wonderful member. Vivek's on our board. He's a big supporter of what we do. We've been asked a lot, so I'm going to tackle the public perception question because I think that's one, probably the most delicate, and happy to talk about delicate and indelicate things, but a really important one. I think the way even you asked that question is there's irrefutable proof. It should be taken for granted, and therefore what's wrong with the public is part of the problem, if I'm being really honest. What is that irrefutable evidence? We all feel it because we all work within this sector or have worked so closely with it for so long that in all of our heads we take that for granted. Of course there's value to the community, as an employer, to our next generation of talent. Like, of course there is. But we get this a lot, starting from that place of assumption versus bringing people along. We put the stat up at the beginning. There's almost 2/3 of us in this country that have some post-secondary credential. That does mean 1/3 of them do not. And for that third who have a job or are doing just fine, there's a bigger challenge, I would argue, than to start from the position of taking that as a given would be one thing. But Is there an opportunity right now for businesses stand up and make that call to action? 100%, because it's one thing for a post-secondary to say, we're really important to you all, and don't you realize how important we are? And a group of employers standing up to say that on their behalf. We know that is a critical thing, and we're part of trying to figure out what those messages are that will resonate and that will be make sense for employers to stand up and say that's.
Exactly. That's a great point. We do have another question here that I'll turn to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael Urban from the Canadian Standards Association. I'm curious in what the panel thinks is holding us back on the labor market information. And specifically, I've been told by a few folks that one of the big problems we have is the lack of, an agreed skills and competencies taxonomy that is used widely across the country that can be linked to education programs and outcomes. And I'm just curious if you agree with that, or if you see that as not as a red herring.
Oh, that's a good one. How many times, there are so many skills taxonomies and efforts that have been invested to create them, and they end up being as big as phone books. And I don't know, the problem is that we need to agree on them as to even, will anybody look at them or use them? Except maybe almost the academics who think that that's a really important exercise. So if we can figure out how to use them properly and deploy them, maybe there's hope. It changes often enough. I mean, to my mind, our labor market information is mostly sort of downloaded StatCan tables that economists forecast forward, and then that's sort of the best that we can do. I don't know how imperative it is to have those taxonomies. I've, again, worked in research in this space for a long time and haven't figured out their utility. If we also went based on forecasts alone, we'd all be truck drivers and coders right now, and that's probably not where forecasts are either. We know companies are sitting on this data, even small ones. We know the biggest companies have a pretty good sense of what they need. We know the smaller ones also do. We aren't very good at surfacing that, extracting it from them and putting it to good use. And so there needs to be that mechanism. Again, I think maybe we've heard a lot about sector councils. We know they extract some of that and then they use it and talk amongst themselves. But I think that's the data lives with the companies. I'm not sure we need the taxonomy, but that's my other provocative pushback.
But don't we need people to know what skills they have? Like, there has to be a clutch between those two gears. Otherwise, they're just going to keep grinding like they are now.
Can the micro-credentials be that?
I would say yes. Funny you talk about micro-credentials. What do micro-credentials have to do with will?
Well, this is studied and stuff because we have some work we're going to hopefully be doing with you, Robert. But and I said this in the panel earlier, what we hear anecdotally, and I'm sure you all do too, for the students who come through a co-op at Waterloo or a smaller, shorter duration micro-credential or innovative will type is those experiences and skills that they have now. If they don't have a way to point to that or point to that experiences or new skills through, for example, micro-credential, then it makes it very hard for them to talk about those new skills that they have. And so the concept would be providing a micro-credential, something that a student can point to say, I did this type of will, and because of that, I have a credential now that says I know how work works, right? I know how to show up on time. I know how, like all those things that employers constantly say they want. And because it's written down somewhere, it's easier for them to talk about it and point to it when they're going through their life. That would be, we've talked about that quite a bit, I think.
Just looking to our host, I don't see anybody in the break room, so we can either be first or wait for people to come. We do have another question. Oh, we have a time sign. This is our last question. We have one last question right here.
For time.
Oh, we got one over here. Sorry about that. There's a light right here. I can't see.
That's all good. I wanted to ask about the slide that you had around Canadian companies not making the most out of post-secondary research. So I own a marketing agency, and I find anecdotally some of the larger companies that we work with are almost overwhelmed by the amount of research they have access to, not just post-secondary, but research in general, and aren't necessarily sure kind of how to see through the weeds of it. On the other hand, a lot of people who do what I do are almost at the other end of the spectrum where they're resource hungry and they feel like they don't have access to that kind of research and could really benefit from the outputs of post-secondary research. Have you been seeing anything similar to that, or like how, in your opinion, do we kind of narrow that gap and break down some of those perceptions? And what are some of the other perceptions that might be holding organizations back from really taking advantage of the output of post-secondary research?
So if we can wrap that up in like 30 seconds or less each, because I just realized we do have another session in here. I made an error. The break doesn't happen until after the next session. So.
The data that we look at to make that claim is around how much businesses are investing in R&D. For the economic nerds, it's BIRD, right? Our business investment in R&D is traditionally also very low when it comes to OECD rankings. I'd be happy to talk to you about that after. It depends for me, my qualifier is at what level of the tech readiness scale we're talking about in terms of research, from very early stage to late stage commercialization prototype potential, because where the off-ramps are for the research at different levels, I think plays a lot into it, who owns the IP, all of that stuff. Bigger issue at the end, not as big an issue at the earlier part of that, so that's only a half answer, sorry.
30 seconds.
Well, I'll give the humanities answer, which is just, I think part of the reason BHER was created was to serve as that translation function between industry and post-secondary. And I think that's definitely needed on work-integrated learning. It's needed on upskilling and reskilling, as you all do through content in your own departments. And it's definitely needed on the research side. In part to sort of your pushback to the what speed question was how it's framed, right? And researchers aren't, and we can say this as researchers, very good at communicating usually. So, that's not the strength. And so, but nor necessarily should it be. And so, having that translation function, I think, is key.
Fantastic. Proprietary eponym. That is the word I was trying to think.
I knew
When
you'd
the
come up
word
with it
means
before
the
the
thing,
end.
BHER means will. BHER means amazing. Please join me in thanking Val Walker and Matt McKean. And I may suggest we just kind of move into the next session.
Great job, guys.
Et puis,